Today we're in Shrewsbury, an ancient English town, market town, a medieval town. And we're in the Quarry in Shrewsbury, which is the park near the river. And we're just standing in front of St Chad's Church, the circular church. It's a pretty historic church. It's where Charles Darwin was baptised. And Charles Darwin was a son of Shrewsbury. And we'll be featuring his life a lot frequently in this film today. But I think you'll enjoy this trip around Shrewsbury. It's a beautiful town. It's so well preserved, and there are two reasons for that. It was never bombed in the war, and it was never really developed in the 1960s because it's a horseshoe shape with the River Severn forming a meander around it. So they had no point in building a motorway through it. So it's an enclosed medieval town, Shrewsbury, and we hear the chimes of the bell. We're in the Quarry here in Shrewsbury. It's a beautiful little setting, isn't it, with the acer trees and the well-kept grounds, the well-kept gardens. Shrewsbury is known as the town of the flowers. So well-kept, you know. This is an English tradition of creating beauty out of nothing. You know, this is such a wonderful setting. If you go to areas which are being colonised by immigrants, they're not very aesthetically pleasing, you know. There's no care and consideration in them. The English love and appreciate this island. They love and appreciate their towns, and they want to enhance them as much as they can. This is the spirit of England, and it's on display here in Shrewsbury, and it's a precious spirit. It's something we should really keep hold of. Let's go and look around these gardens. We're in the heart of Shrewsbury here, and yet it's such a beautiful place. England in the autumn, the season of mist and mellow fruitfulness. Close bosom friends of the fast maturing sun, as Keats put it. Yeah, it's so beautiful. And this is the true spirit of England. A spirit which uplifts, a spirit which civilises and enhances. And this is what we can't afford to lose in this country. We need the English spirit to pervade every area of these islands, because that's the spirit which brings forth good fruit. And yet we see in our cities now so many social problems, so many social ills. That's the product of bad fruit. It's not the English spirit. So we're in a battle here to keep England beautiful. Tommy, the symbolic name for every Englishman. And we know we have a Tommy who's fighting for us now, don't we? Tommy Robinson. I think that Tommy, it's trying to educate people about what's happening to our country, that we're being dispossessed and replaced in our own land, that alien cultures are coming here and taking what is ours, and they have no appreciation for it. To them it's just, you know, loot in the back pocket. And where are we going to go, the English? I mean, will my children and grandchildren be able to enjoy these parklands and this peace and these ancient towns like Shrewsbury? Or will we be driven completely from this land? And Tommy, the soldier of the First World War, who sacrificed so much for this country and to maintain the independence of this country and the integrity of this country, is Tommy going to become a name? It's crossed out, and in its place is going to be put the name of Muhammad. Where the brass bands play tiddly-om-bom-bom. I love these brass band stands, you know, and oh, look at that piece of Victorian nostalgia there. Beautiful ironwork, so well preserved, reminiscent of an earlier England, an England of joy, an England of celebration, merry England. You can imagine the music coming from that. The summer days here in this beautiful parkland. We're on the banks of the Severn River now. We're going to go up to the Severn River and have a look at this vista across Shrewsbury. We're actually on the banks of the River Severn now, which is the main artery, the main waterway between Wales and England. It flows right down to Bristol, cuts right across the west of England. It's the longest river in England, and it's a beautiful sight. You know, we love water in England. We love to be close to water. We've got, see, there's 2 rowing clubs here, boat houses on the banks of the river. And obviously in term time, the lads from the school at the overlooking the river there, Shrewsbury School, very famous school, they come down here and they practice their rowing on the river. Shrewsbury School is famous for many reasons, but principally it was where Charles Darwin was educated. Charles Darwin, the great naturalist. We're going to see his statue shortly. It's one of the great English public schools, one of the 8 greats they're called, and it's produced many people through the years. The notorious Michael Heseltine, the Euro fanatic, he was educated there. So were the founder of Private Eye, Richard Ingram's, Willie Rushton, Paul Foote. They actually wrote the school magazine, and that was the basis for Private Eye. And it's produced great people throughout the history of England. You know, yeah, very significant school, Shrewsbury School. This road that we're on now is called the Town Wall. And you've seen here, this is one of the main towers on the town wall. Defensive towers. We're facing Wales here. On the other side of the Severn were the Welsh, and they constantly raided this place. In fact, this was quite a military establishment at one point, Shrewsbury. But in the 18th century, they started to knock large parts of the wall down and build beautiful Georgian houses, but we've lost a lot of the wall. But the wall, this was part of the wall, and we'll carry on along the town wall, because on the right, some of the original wall is still remaining. So we're going to take a look at that. We love our town walls. What I love about these Georgian properties is that the original detail is still intact on the doorways. It's quite beautiful, you know. It's been there for over 200 years. It's just a domestic setting, but it's obviously very much appreciated. We're actually on the old walls of Shrewsbury here. This was England's first line of defence against the Welsh hordes when they used to come across. They used to come over to raid farms to get livestock and sheep, but also at times to make a claim for territory. And these Welsh raids went on for a long time, right into the 15th century, Owen Glendower. Over 1,000 years. There was battles here fought between the English and the Welsh. And these are high walls. I mean, this is serious defensive stuff. And we're going to take a walk along the town wall of Shrewsbury. So we're ascending the Wild Cop here, past these beautiful black and white half timber buildings, original Tudor buildings, all Grade 1 listed. And at the top of them is the Lion Hotel, or the Lion Public House. This is where Charles Darwin was staying before he went on his famous journey on the HMS Beagle to the Pacific Ocean, where he developed his theory of evolution and the descent of man. So we're going to go to the Lion Pub now, and we're going to see the actual spot where Charles Darwin began his journey on the Beagle. We're inside the Lion Hotel. This is where Charles Darwin used to stay on his visits to Shrewsbury. This was an important hotel. It was on the London to Holywell sort of road, which would lead to Ireland, and obviously connected Shrewsbury with the port of England. So this was Darwin's location. Darwin probably sat in this room, relaxed here, and pondered his theories on nature. Yeah, so one of the most famous books in the history of the world, The Origin of Species, written by Charles Darwin in 1859, began here. This is where his journey began. caught the coach here to London and then boarded the HMS Beagle and began his journey. He went to the Galapagos Islands in the Pacific Ocean. He went to Tahiti. He went to the islands of the Pacific, many islands, and he noticed the varieties in the species and how they'd evolved from island to island, and he began to create his theory of evolution. Now, a lot of people think that Charles Darwin was anti-Christian, but he wasn't. He always said that he wasn't an atheist. He always believed in God, or it was at least an agnostic, because he said he was only explaining the mechanics of nature, how things change over time. He was talking about how species originate, but he wasn't talking about how life itself originates. He wasn't talking about the meaning of life, or the destiny of life, or the goal of life. He was talking about something very scientific. So I see Darwin as, in a sense, underpinning Christianity, not demolishing it, because he's showing that nature has an inner dynamic of change. Where does that inner dynamic come from? It doesn't come from nature itself. It comes from the divine, from the eternal design which God has imposed on the whole universe. That's unfolded over time. And Darwin found the key to that. That the stories in the Bible about creation, about Adam and Eve, they're allegorical stories. They're not actually scientific, because the Bible is not a scientific textbook. It reveals God to man. They're important moral and spiritual truths which come out of Scripture. And we need to hold on to that. I don't think there's any conflict between the theory of evolution and the Christian teachings. I believe they complement each other. We're now about to enter the medieval heart of Shrewsbury. There's some very strange street names in this place, so get ready. We're coming off Fish Street now and we're going up the Bears Steps. Believe it or not, this is where the bears were taken to fight in the pits, the bear pits at the top of this. These people have walked up these steps for almost 1,000 years with and without bears. This is the famous or infamous Grope Lane in the heart of Shrewsbury. This is where the ladies of the night, up to the 19th century, would ply their trade. It's called Grope Lane for obvious reasons, but until the 18th century, it was actually called Cunt Lane. That's what it was actually called, officially. But as sensibilities changed, that name was removed. But this is a medieval place of prostitution. Incredible. The mighty River Severn, the longest river in England, flowing down towards Bristol, the Bristol Channel, and out into the Irish Sea. We're on the Welsh Bridge, the exit from Shrewsbury. This is the Welsh side, the west side of town. Shrewsbury is built on a meander of the Severn. It's like a horseshoe shape, and the ancient town is within that horseshoe. This is the ancient Shrewsbury prison, actually built in the 18th century, 1793. The most famous prisoner here is actually quite recent, Ricky Tomlinson in the Shrewsbury Severn, who were 7 trade unionists who were imprisoned here for their behaviour on picket lines. 20 years ago, I had a friend who actually was incarcerated here, Robbie Ryder. And he said he walked out of these prison gates and he looked in front of him and could see the Welsh Hills on the left, Shrewsbury Castle on the right, and the station on the extreme right. And he said what a feeling that was, and it still looks as good today as the sun's setting over Shrewsbury. We're just walking out of the prison into freedom. Believe it or not, this Gothic masterpiece is actually a railway station. The detail is fantastic in it. It was built by Thomas Manwaring Penson, who we saw some of his buildings in Chester last week. Beautiful tower, Gothic tower, great detail. Built in 1843, one of the oldest surviving railway stations. Magnificent piece of architecture. It could be a library, could be a public school, could even be a church, but it's the place where the train stopped. How magnificent is that? But if we swing the camera around, we're actually standing in front of Shrewsbury Castle. Beautiful red sandstone castle, built by Robert of Montgomery. This whole area was given to him by William the Conqueror. He was one of the Norman knights that arrived after the conquest and dominated this area. He's got his own county in Wales, Montgomery County. Very famous castle, this. One mutiny in the 13th century, 100 men were hung from these gullets here. The great man himself, Charles Darwin, the author of The Origin of Species, The Descent of Man, the man who challenged this sort of orthodox perspective on the world, how it had been formed and how it had changed, and give us a modern perspective on life, at least the material aspect of life, how we evolved over time. He was born in this town in 1809 during the Napoleonic Wars, and he spent the first 27 years of his life in Shrewsbury. Attended this school here behind me, the original building of Shrewsbury School. Of course, it's now moved to the river. And he was baptised at St Chad's Church. And he always had an affection for this town. He always returned. He stayed at the Lion Hotel. He didn't die here, but he had family here right into his death. And a world historical figure, Charles Darwin. Probably Shrewsbury's greatest son. Robert Clive of India. He was an MP for Shrewsbury and also the town mayor. But more importantly, he was the victorious colonel in the famous Battle of Plassey in 1757. It was fought in Bengal in India between about 1,000 British troops and their mass Indian support, and an equal number of French troops and the Nawab of Bengal. It was a battle for who would control the trade of India, and the English came out on top. Clive won. 1757, the year of victories in the 7 Years' War, when we had Wolfe of Quebec, he defeated the French in North America. It was a world war between France and England came out victorious, and it's largely thanks to this man. He was just 32 years old at the Battle of Plassey, and by defeating the Nawab of Bengal, he inherited the vast wealth of that part of India at the time. It was actually wealthier than Britain. Its population was bigger than Britain. And Clive was the overlord. And it was really the source of the Raj, of the wealth of the Raj, of the East India Company, who employed him as one of their military sort of strategists. And he was really, in many ways, the founder of the British Empire, which is based on India and encompassed the whole of the Indian Ocean and led to the development of Britain as the great power of the world. So this is a world historical figure, Robert Clive. Unfortunately, although he became extremely wealthy through his adventures in India, he also brought back with him the curse of India, opium addiction. He was addicted to opium. And he died in his 40s, 1949 I think he was when he died. Extremely wealthy, a very eloquent member of Parliament, but his habit killed him, and all that wealth just went to waste. So it was a bit of a tragic figure, but a truly great figure as well. Behind us is the ancient market hall of Shrewsbury, the Drapers' Hall. Shrewsbury was famous for its wool, the centre of the wool trade. The Drapers built this at the time of Queen Elizabeth I. It's an Elizabethan market hall, one of the few still remaining. As you can see, the ground floor is open for traders, and the first floor is enclosed for the drapers. And there's an inscription on here. It was built by the bailiffs of Shrewsbury. The bailiffs actually meant the mayors, the people who control the bailey, who control the castle. So great piece of history there. It's an amazing space here, open space where they would do the market trading. This was like the exchange. People would make deals. Obviously there was cover for the rain, but they would bring their sheep in here, they would bring their goods in here, and they would barter. But the people that were important, the Draper Company, they ascended the steps and went into the Draper's Hall, which is up here. Locked today. The ascent and the descent of man. It's twilight in Shrewsbury, the night's coming in, and we're going home now. If you've enjoyed this video, please feel free to subscribe. There's a PayPal link in the description if you would like to donate. We're hoping to go to other towns and cities across Britain and make more videos appreciating the history of this great island, trying to stimulate people to feel passionate about defending what is ours. So feel free to donate. Thank you.